Conducted by Convention of States Action in partnership with the Trafalgar Group finds 39% of respondents blame Joe Biden for rising inflation, while 25% say Congress is responsible. A further breakdown shows 64% of Republicans, 35% of independents, and nearly 22% of Democrats believe rising inflation is Biden's fault. Well, here to talk about this data further is the president of Convention of States Action, Mark Meckler. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Good to be with you today.
Before we get to the data, tell us more about what Convention of States Action is.
Sure. I think it's really appropriate right now. What Convention of States Action is an organization of 5 million people across the country right now and growing every day who are working to use Article 5 of the Constitution to call a convention of states to propose amendments to the Constitution to take power away from the federal government and give it back to the people and the states. Obviously, you see with inflation rising, this is being caused by the federal government. It's a timely project right now.
Absolutely. Now, based on this poll, we're seeing a bipartisan majority blaming Biden for rising inflation, while a smaller percentage believe Congress is responsible. What does this say about leadership in Washington?
I think this is incredible. When you look at the numbers across parties, what you see is, especially between an overall majority, Republicans, independents, over 50% say Biden and Congress together, which is, of course, how money is spent here in the United States of America. And so what the people are identifying correctly is that the federal government pumping all of this money into the economy is causing inflation. Inflation is essentially just a hidden tax. Right? It makes every dollar in the pocket of the people, regular people like you and I, worth a lot less. And that's what's costing people money. And people respond to things that are impacting their pocketbook. Even among Democrats, you have a full over one third of Democrats believe that Congress and Biden are causing inflation. I think this shows that Washington, D.C. is disconnected from the American people.
And it's really interesting because we have Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen saying that inflation, it's going to be transitory, but then you have business owners and companies, they have fear that they need to raise their prices because of everything that's going on, and the prices of everything keeps on jumping, and then that's passed on to the consumer as well. So it really points to what's going to happen over the next few months. A Convention of States Action has previously partnered up with the Trafalgar Group to conduct polls such as this. Are you seeing any sort of trends or commonalities regarding how Americans are responding to the direction of this country?
Yeah, what I'm seeing generally, we've seen this for a long time, but it's very pronounced under this administration, is that the American public generally believes that Washington, D.C. is disconnected from the people of America. Another great example is we did polling on the XL pipeline and pipelines in general. Over 61% of Americans believe that pipelines are critical to America's energy infrastructure, and yet we see the Biden administration stopping the XL pipeline. So on issue after issue, whether it's Israel, whether it is what America is doing in its energy industries, whether it is inflation and monetary policy, Washington, D.C. is doing something different from what the American people believe. As somebody who travels all over this country, I've been in 48 states in the last 2 years, meeting with grassroots. I talk to them every single day. I can tell you the grassroots, the regular American people, they are much smarter than the folks in Washington, D.C., and D.C. is headed in the wrong direction.
And we're still about a year and a half out from the midterms, but what do you think is going to happen? I mean, a lot can happen until then, but what do you think is going to happen, or what do you think voters are going to say about this?
Well, if I had to predict today, what I think you're going to see is a Republican wave. There are a bunch of factors that point to that. One is the disconnect from the American people. You said Treasury Secretary Yellen said that inflation is transitory. Well, everything's transitory. The question is, how long is it in place? And it's punishing American people in the pocketbook right now. You see radical policies coming from the administration on everything from state-sponsored racism, and by that I mean critical theory stuff being promoted in the military, not supported by the American people, in the schools, not supported by the American people. So you have all these policies, monetary policy, foreign policy, America going weak again, and then you add that into redistricting. So redistricting is going to be taking place here this year, and that'll affect congressional balance of power going into 2021. That's going to advantage Republicans as well. Republicans are dominant in the state legislatures right now. If everything stays as it is right now on the same trajectory, I would expect a Republican wave, especially in the House of Representatives. I'm here live in Philadelphia at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. When you hear the phrase lives, fortunes, and sacred honor, these are the folks we should think of, those who anonymously gave their lives. Well, today you have a chance to volunteer. You need to volunteer for conventionofstates.com, the movement that's going to save the country. These folks were willing to step up and give everything. We need you to give just a little bit. Go to conventionofstates.com and volunteer today.